Throughout the vast and turbulent story of human civilization, there have been moments that stand apart from all others, moments where time itself seemed to hold its breath, where the weight of the world rested on a single choice, a single voice, a single hand poised to act. From the blood-soaked shores of distant battlefields to the corridors of power where leaders wrestled with the unthinkable, history has never been a passive force. It has been shaped, broken, and rebuilt by human beings standing at crossroads they never asked to face. This is the story of those crossroads, of decisions made under impossible pressure, with incomplete knowledge, and consequences that would echo across generations. Wars won and lost, walls built and torn down, weapons unleashed that changed the very nature of human conflict forever. Because throughout all of human history, one truth remains undeniable. A single choice can reshape the world for generations to come. Those who held power faced a burden unlike anything history had prepared them for. By 1944 and 1945, the Second World War had consumed nearly every corner of the globe. Cities lay in ruin. Entire generations had been swallowed by trenches, oceans, and firestorms. The archival footage tells the story words struggle to carry. Exhausted soldiers with hollow eyes, mothers searching through rubble, children born into a world that had forgotten peace. This was not a war of distant headlines. It was a catastrophe measured in millions of lives. And yet, even amid this devastation, decisions still had to be made. Commanders, presidents, and prime ministers sat in rooms far from the front lines, staring at maps that represented not territory, but human lives. The weight of command had never been heavier, and the choices that followed would define not just the war, but the entire modern world. By the spring of 1944, the weight of the free world rested on the shoulders of one man. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower stood at the edge of history, facing a decision that no military leader had ever confronted at such scale. Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted, was ready. 150,000 troops, thousands of vessels stretching across the English Channel as far as the eye could see. Paratroopers checking their gear in the darkness, young men writing final letters home. But the weather was turning. Meteorologists delivered grim forecasts. Storms threatened to scatter the fleet, ground the aircraft, and expose soldiers to catastrophic conditions on the beaches. Eisenhower could wait, or he could go. He understood with absolute clarity that a failed invasion would hand Hitler a propaganda victory, potentially prolonging the war by years and condemning millions more to suffering and death. As dawn broke on June 6, 1944, thousands of Allied soldiers stormed 5 beaches along the Normandy coastline. The chaos was immediate and devastating. At Omaha Beach, American troops faced withering German fire, with casualties mounting in the first terrifying minutes. Men fell before they even reached the sand. At Utah Beach, American forces found slightly more favorable conditions, pushing inland with grim determination. British and Canadian soldiers at Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches fought through fortified defences, street by street, metre by metre. The human cost was staggering, nearly 10,000 Allied casualties in a single day. Yet by nightfall, the Atlantic Wall had been breached. Eisenhower's agonizing gamble had paid off. The foothold established that morning gave the Allies an irreversible momentum. Within 11 months, Nazi Germany would surrender unconditionally. One decision, made under impossible pressure, had fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization. With Nazi Germany's defeat secured, the world's attention turned to the Pacific, where a different and equally brutal war still raged. Japan fought with extraordinary ferocity, defending every island, every shoreline, with soldiers who refused surrender as a matter of honor and culture. American forces had witnessed this resolve firsthand at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, battles so savage they left entire generations scarred. Military planners presented President Harry S. Truman with projections that were almost incomprehensible. A land invasion of the Japanese mainland, codenamed Operation Downfall, was estimated to cost over 1 million Allied casualties alone, with Japanese losses potentially far exceeding that number. Truman, barely months into his presidency after Franklin Roosevelt's sudden death, now faced a decision no leader in history had ever confronted. In laboratories across America, the Manhattan Project scientists had quietly built something that could change everything, a weapon of almost unimaginable destructive power, waiting for a single authorization. The decision to use the atomic bomb was not made lightly. Within Truman's inner circle, fierce debates erupted. Secretary of War Henry Stimson advocated for careful consideration, while military leaders debated alternatives, including a naval blockade, continued conventional bombing, or a negotiated surrender through Soviet intervention. Meanwhile, the very scientists who built the weapon grew deeply troubled. Figures like Leo Szilard circulated petitions urging the government to reconsider, warning that unleashing such destruction would cross a moral threshold humanity could never uncross. A special target committee carefully selected Hiroshima and Nagasaki, choosing cities largely untouched by conventional bombing to accurately measure the weapon's devastating impact. On July 25, 1945, Truman signed the final authorization order. No leader in recorded history had ever commanded such catastrophic destructive power. Whatever justification existed, the world was about to change in ways no human mind could fully comprehend. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay released Little Boy over Hiroshima. In a single blinding flash, an entire city vanished. Approximately 80,000 people died instantly. 3 days later, Fat Man fell on Nagasaki, killing an estimated 40,000 more within moments. Survivors, known as hibakusha, described a world turned to ash, shadows burned permanently into stone walls where human beings once stood. The radiation poisoning that followed claimed thousands more in the weeks, months, and years afterward. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, ending the deadliest conflict in human history. Yet the debate has never truly ended. Were these bombings a necessary evil that saved millions from a catastrophic land invasion? Or did they represent humanity crossing an irreversible moral threshold, unleashing a weapon that would haunt civilization forever? Truman's decision remains history's most contested judgment, carrying consequences no single leader had ever before placed upon the world. As the dust of World War II settled, Europe found itself fractured along ideological fault lines. The Allied victory had divided the continent between democratic West and Soviet-controlled East, and nowhere was this division more visible, more painful than in the city of Berlin. On August 13, 1961, East German authorities began constructing what would become one of history's most powerful symbols of political oppression. Overnight, families were separated. Neighbors became strangers divided by concrete and barbed wire. Streets that had once flowed freely were severed without warning. Archival footage captures the grim efficiency of East German guards patrolling the wall's length, their orders clear, their humanity tested daily. On one side, the vibrant energy of West Berlin. On the other, the muted grey existence of the East. This was not merely a wall of concrete. It was a wall built from ideology, fear, and the devastating consequences of decisions made by men far removed from the lives they were destroying. By the late 1980s, the Soviet grip on Eastern Europe was visibly loosening. Mikhail Gorbachev had introduced two transformative reforms: glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring. policies that inadvertently gave captive nations permission to dream of freedom. Across Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, citizens flooded the streets in massive protests, demanding change that decades of authoritarian rule had violently suppressed. The Soviet Union, economically exhausted and politically fractured, could no longer enforce obedience through fear alone. Then came November 9th, 1989. At a routine East Berlin press conference, government spokesman Günter Schabowski was handed a note he had never seen before. When journalists asked when new travel regulations would take effect, he shuffled his papers and replied immediately without delay. He had not been briefed. He did not know the policy was meant for the following morning. That single word, immediately, spoken without full knowledge, would accidentally dismantle one of history's most fortified symbols of oppression. And then, almost without warning, history moved faster than anyone could contain it. Within hours of Schabowski's announcement, thousands of East Germans surged toward the checkpoints. Border guards, receiving no orders to stop them, simply stepped aside. People flooded through, weeping, laughing, embracing strangers as though they had known them their entire lives. Because in a way, they had. West Berliners rushed to meet them, arms open, champagne flowing into the cold November air. And then came the hammers. Ordinary people, armed with pickaxes and bare hands, began dismantling the very concrete that had imprisoned a generation. Each strike echoed something deeper than demolition. It was the sound of suppressed longing finally breaking free. No military order caused this. No treaty was signed. A bureaucratic mistake, met with extraordinary public courage, unravelled 28 years of enforced division in a single extraordinary night. These three decisions were not isolated moments. They were stones dropped into the ocean of history, and their ripples are still reaching us today. Eisenhower's gamble on June 6, 1944 did not merely liberate France. It redrew the entire map of Europe, dismantled the Nazi Empire, and established the Western alliance that would define global politics for decades. Truman's authorization of the atomic bomb did not simply end World War II. It launched the nuclear age, triggered a terrifying arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union, and created a doctrine of mutually assured destruction that held the world in anxious balance for generations. And the fall of the Berlin Wall did not merely reunite a divided city. It signaled the collapse of Soviet authority, the liberation of Eastern Europe, and the emergence of an entirely new world order. Each choice echoed far beyond its moment, reshaping civilization itself. These were not inevitable moments. They were human ones. Eisenhower staring at weather reports in the dark. Truman signing an order he could never take back. Schabowski reading words that accidentally freed a nation. Each man carried incomplete information, impossible pressure, and the full weight of consequence. History does not arrive through fate. It arrives through decisions made by ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, people who doubted, who feared, who chose anyway. As these images wash over you, Normandy's bloodied shores, Hiroshima's silent aftermath, Berlin's crumbling wall, remember that no one living through those moments knew how the story would end. Neither do we. The choices being made today, in boardrooms, in parliaments, in quiet moments of personal courage, are already becoming history. Future generations will study them, debate them, and judge them. The only question worth asking is, what will your decisions leave behind?